The next morning, Mexico businessman Monas Albert learned that an Aeroperu flight had crashed.
5 minutes after takeoff, the crew informed the tower that they were having an emergency and they requested clearance to return to Lima. During the process, contact with the aircraft was lost at 0110, with the latest position of the aircraft being 50 miles north of the city of Lima.
About 6 o'clock in the morning, I got up and turned on the news channel, and I heard there was a crash, an airplane crash of Aeroperu, but the news mentioned New York to Lima.
Rescue operations are underway by authorities. The aircraft was carrying 61 passengers and 9 crew members.
His brother-in-law and his business partner were on Aeroperu 603.
So I went to the shower and didn't pay a lot of attention. But when I came out, they corrected the news and they said from Lima to Santiago. And I knew in that plane, Kenny and Abraham were flying. The news was very vague, so they mentioned there might be some survivors, and they mentioned that the plane crashed on Pacific Ocean, and they didn't have a lot of news, and the crash was at night. So in my mind, I thought that the plane sort of landed on water and most people got out.
Guido Fernandez had just been appointed Peru's accident investigator. Aeroperu was his first case. The co-pilot, David Fernandez, was his nephew.
I was in bed. It was about 4:30 in the morning, and they called me. Your nephew is lost in an airplane. They asked me, I mean, how do you feel that your nephew was a co-pilot? My gosh, I feel very bad, but I'm a professional. I have to do a job. I have to comply and complete my duty. So that's what I did.
Fernandez rushed to the crash site in a Navy helicopter. It was clear there were no survivors. 9 bodies were floating in the debris. The rest sank with the 757. Fernandez met with the air traffic controller at Lima Tower. His account was baffling.
Well, the controller really didn't know. He was just trying to help. So he did all he could to help him. But unfortunately, for him, it was a new emergency too.
Fernandez put thoughts of his nephew out of his mind. His job was to retrieve the aircraft's flight data and voice recorders to determine what happened. He needed help. Fernandez contacted the National Transportation Safety Board in Washington, D.C., the world's leading agency for air accident investigation.
They had found the aircraft. It was pretty well documented by radar. The Navy, the Peruvian Navy, had gotten a fix on the flotsam and the wreckage in the ocean. And the only thing left to do was find it on the bottom of the ocean, which they did not have the facilities for.
Rodriguez flew to Lima to join Guido Fernandez's effort to find answers.
I found out that his nephew was the first officer. I suggested that perhaps they should consider removing Captain Fernandez from the investigation because of emotional involvement and what have you.
The American investigator's concerns soon vanished.
He was very objective, I would say an excellent investigator, considering that it was, and not a distant nephew, I mean, it was his very close relative. He did an outstanding job.
The black box in the Boeing 757 can emit a locator beacon for 30 days before batteries run dead. The US Navy provided underwater remote-operated vehicles to survey the debris field, seeking the black boxes. The wreckage confirmed that the plane went down in one piece.
I've done in-flight breakups that were spread over 15, 16 miles and maybe a mile and a half wide, which tells you instantly that just what you know of looking at the wreckage, that this thing didn't hit in one piece. It clearly was disintegrating as it was crashing. But in this case, it was a fairly tight debris field, and so obviously it hit at high speed and was fairly closely knit wreckage pattern.
The data recorders were retrieved from the 757. Brought to the surface, the boxes were placed in coolers full of fresh water to keep them from oxidizing. They were taken back to Washington for analysis at the NTSB. The cockpit recorder could offer the evidence investigators sought. Every word spoken by pilots Schreiber and Fernandez, and every unnerving alarm, was recorded on audio tape. The recorded voices were faint, sometimes hard to make out, but the chaos in the cockpit rang through with chilling clarity. The tape was digitized into a computer, filtered and enhanced. Now investigators had the clue they'd been looking for.
It was clear to us that they were really experiencing a problem with airspeed and altitude. And the airspeed and altitude indications in the aircraft are strictly a function of what we call the pitot-static system.
The pitot-static system is found on all aircraft, large or small. External ports measure outside air pressure to provide data on altitude and speed. If these ports are blocked, the plane's computers receive false data and generate false warnings. But why these ports would be blocked was a mystery. Robotic vehicles searched for the missing piece of the puzzle. What they found stunned investigators. Captain Schreiber's static port was completely blocked with tape. Investigators now learned what happened. Just before Aeroperu 603 lifted off from Lima, maintenance workers cleaned the aircraft. A worker covered the static ports with tape to protect them. This is standard procedure. But he forgot to remove the tape. It was a small oversight with catastrophic results.
The taping was never removed. And when the airplane departed and started to fly, nothing but trapped static sea level air pressure was sensed by those instruments. And in matter of fact, the airplane was climbing up in thinner air, and the information presented on the instruments and to the air data computer was false, which generated just totally non-normal readings.
The inspector who was supposed to quality check his work did not do it. And the supervisor out on the line that night was not there. He was sick, and there was a regular mechanic who was filling that role. He did not see it. And the captain or the pilot, in this case the captain did the pre-flight. They do a walk around looking for just that kind of thing. The captain did the pre-flight that night, and he did not detect it either.
A little piece of paper with glue caused an accident. But the paper and the glue are not to blame. Humans are to blame, because humans use that tape in the wrong place for the wrong purpose.
Another accident, shockingly similar to Aeroperu 603, had happened just 8 months earlier to another 757. In February 1996, 189 people died when a German charter called Bergen Air crashed 5 miles after takeoff from Puerto Plata, Dominican Republic. The NTSB assisted in the investigation. A survey of the wreckage revealed that one pitot tube, the other critical part of the pitot-static system, was blocked. As with Aeroperu 603, night was the pilot's worst enemy. The Bergen Air pilot flipped the plane upside down before crashing into the sea.
The Bergen accident clearly pointed out already that a crew will get confused by these cryptic advisories, rudder ratio, mark airspeed trim, and not getting a clear indication what the underlying problem is, which is a problem with the air data computer or anything which comes behind it, the pitot tube or the static port. These were facts which were well known to the manufacturer, and so it happened again.
3 months after the Bergen Air crash, bulletins were issued to all airline carriers about the pitot-static problems. But Aeroperu had not yet implemented the changes.
The bulletins and the, let's call it the fruits of the Dominican Republic investigation of Bergen Air had not yet reached Aeroperu at the time this accident occurred. The Peruvian government very correctly made a point of that in their report on the accident, saying that they should have given more impetus to those recommendations to get them out to the industry quicker.
Well, it's very unfortunate, but it comes back to the fact that communication in aviation is sometimes deficient. There is not that high level of exchange of information between different operators, as they're all competitors. They do not exchange certain information, and specifically not the one which is safety related. And that's definitely the case in the Aeroperu accident.
9,700, but it is indicating too low terrain.
Even if Schreiber and Fernandez had known about Bergen Air, it may not have helped them survive, given the high pressure of their situation.
We lower gear.
It's easy to sit here in the 757 cockpit and play the Monday morning quarterback. Having heard the bells and the overspeed warnings, the ground proximity warning, the stall warning, it's very easy to do that and sit here and say what I would have done being an experienced pilot. But to put yourself into the position of those two pilots that night, they were in an extremely difficult situation to fly that airplane and recover from that experience.
2 weeks after the crash, Monas Albert joined dozens of grieving families, seeking the remains of his brother-in-law and friend. He finally identified them in a Lima morgue.
I wanted to find them. I really wanted to find them. And one part of me didn't want to find them because there was this fantasy that if I don't find them, maybe they're in an island with a drink and looking at some girls dancing. I can close the chapter. I can go and take him and have him buried, and there'll be a place for the family to go and put some flowers once in a while and say, okay, my brother-in-law's here, or my dad is here, or my husband is here.
Now that investigators had the answer to the mysterious loss of Aeroperu 603, the lawsuits began. In November 1996, a Miami lawyer took on the case on behalf of 41 passengers and crew, arguing that the manufacturer, Boeing, was liable for the accident.
Boeing has to foresee the misuse of their product. In other words, the manufacturer of a product is legally liable for the foreseeable misuse of their product if it can be corrected. In other words, Boeing builds the airplane with potential hazard in it. That hazard is that in order to clean the airplane, you have to cover the static port. And if you don't take it off, the airplane can crash.
I wanted them back, and since I couldn't get them back, at least I wanted the wives of the victims to get compensated. How much is that worth? I don't know. I didn't know. Abraham had 3 daughters, and now they don't have a father. So what is the compensation? The best compensation, if can be done, is get them back. Give them life back again. But because that is not possible, then the other possibility is to get a monetary compensation. And then you fight for the best compensation you can get.
Boeing argued that Aeroperu was at fault, not its 757. An Aeroperu worker taped the static port, which is marked with clear warnings. Boeing also blamed Captain Eric Schreiber. It was his job to visually inspect the aircraft before taking off. But investigator Richard Rodriguez can understand how Schreiber overlooked the tape on the static port.
One of the reasons is it's very high. It's about maybe 15, 17 feet up in the air. And at night with a flashlight, and this happened to be duct tape, which you're not supposed to use. They specify the tape, and it was duct tape, which is silver. So it would not distinguish itself against the background of the fuselage of the aircraft. So basically 3 or 4 people failed to detect the tape on the aircraft prior to departure.
As the search for blame continued, the worker who taped the ports was jailed for his negligence.
Lawyers, you know, sometimes they confuse matters, and they send the guy and ask people questions and ask questions, and the one that stuck the tape was the painter, was the lowest cultured and the one that knew less about what could happen. And the judge resolved that he was the one responsible, and he was in jail.
So that you don't lose the airplane because a maintenance man making $2 an hour down in Peru makes a mistake. It's foreseeable that that kind of a person is going to make a mistake. That's human nature, they're going to make a mistake. And you build your system so you don't lose your $50 million airplane because a maintenance guy makes a simple mistake.
Schreiber and Fernandez were also scrutinized. Veteran pilot Alan McLeod believes that in their situation, he would not have attempted to land. He would have continued to fly for as long as he could, with the plane angled upward slightly and the speed set just above cruise.
Experience has shown that if you don't fly the airplane when you're experiencing an abnormal situation, and they certainly were, you must fly the airplane. Just concentrate on flying the airplane and get the airplane under control, first and foremost.
Are we going down now? We have 370 knots.
If you don't do that, the airplane's going to bite you, and you're going to end up in more serious situations. So I would fly the airplane, make sure I was able to fly it safely, if only by using the attitude direction indicator and normal power settings that I was familiar with, and then eventually work my way back and get it on the ground.
Pilots call it flying by numbers, relying not on computers, but on basic aviation and human instinct.
It always becomes a problem when pilots are reduced to be push-buttonists. The man-machine interface has to work, and has to work as humans are to operate these airplanes. They have to be designed appropriately for the use of a human being. Of course, you can put in all digits and numbers and computer gimmicks, and you can, but still it's man who has to operate and survey it. And I believe a human being should be in charge.
In 1999, Boeing and Aeroperu decided to settle the lawsuits out of court. Families and loved ones received an exceptional settlement, averaging $1 million US per victim. The damages were high because of the terrible way the passengers and crew on Aeroperu died.
We were able to show that a lot of the people were alive. In a crash like this, a lot of the people would survive the crash and then died of drowning. There was no question in our minds that the people suffered terrible, terrible terror and pain when this happened to them. They were horrified. They were awake. They knew what happened.
The disaster helped sink Aeroperu. Combined with increased competition and rising debt, the national airline went bankrupt in 1999. Boeing increased training on pitot-static problems and issued new regulations about unapproved static port covers. Since 1996, there has not been another pitot-static failure like the one on Aeroperu 603.
The designers of these products and the manufacturers of the products know that they have to take safety into account. They have to, of course, they do that because they know it's the right thing to do. But they also know that if they don't do it, there's going to be somebody watching them that's going to investigate it, that's going to find out why it happened, and that they're going to be accountable for what they do wrong. And that if they don't take into consideration safety, they're going to have to pay for it.
Well, the accidents made the aviation industry aware that something simple like a pitot tube or a static port can cause a major incident or even an accident. And even airline pilots were reminded that this is a vital basic thing and it may happen, and this is the way how to prevent it to turn into a catastrophe.
The case was settled, the industry repented, and moved on. Such is the world of commercial aviation. But it was little consolation for those whose lives were scarred forever by an insignificant piece of tape.
It suddenly say that guy doesn't exist anymore. It's very hard to swallow that. It's very hard to understand. And it took me a long time to accept it. So the memory is still there, and it will be there for a long time. I'm not going to let go. I don't want to let go.